Hello and welcome back, and you know these guys, Terramaster over here, if you're a follower of the channel, you'll know that despite the fact the last 18 to 24 months has seen a slew of new players enter the world of network attached storage, these guys have pretty much just kept their head down and cracked on. Often considered the underdogs in the world of NAS, they've never really been able to puncture the hold in the market that the big players like Synology and QNAP have, but at the same time have held the third position and jockeyed for it with the likes of UGREEN and of course Asustor prior to them for a long time. And now just at the start of Q4 2025, we're now hearing about a new 4 and 2 bay solution they're rocking out that I would argue, for the price, for the architecture, is going to be the score to beat. Now I should highlight, this is not it. This is the F4-425 and the F2-425, two devices that we are going to be coming back to later in the video that are currently going through review. I want to talk about the F4-425 Plus and the F2-425 Plus, a 2-bay and a 4-bay NAS solution that are going to be rocking out with the N150 Twin Lake processor. Not new, we've seen devices rock out early this year with that, but this is a 2 and a 4-bay device respectively that are not only rocking out with 3 M.2 NVMe bays inside, but also 2 5 gig network connections there on the rear, pretty much raising the standard of what the last 8, 9, 10 months has shown NAS brands rocking out with that processor, putting arguably even QNAP to shame in terms of the hardware that's capable with that CPU. These are going to be rocking out at $569 for the 4-bay and $399 for the 2-bay. Now, alongside this, they're rocking out with 8 gig of RAM, and pretty much that is it. We know, for example, it's going to have the USB 10 gig connections there at USB Type A and Type C. We know it's going to be rocking out with that processor, so we know exactly what that's going to be capable of. We also know there's no PCIe slot. But this video is largely about me describing why I think it's the score to beat. You see, there's this tier in the world of network attached storage, this bit right in the middle that sits at around $500 to $599. All NAS brands have it, and ultimately, until recently, the standard has been an Intel 4-core processor, 4 gig of memory, at least 2 2.5 GBE network ports, and a couple of M.2 NVMe's, at least at the 4-bay level, with a 2-bay largely the same hardware, but with fewer bays and around about $150 to $200 less. Now, that standard is pretty wide across the marketplace. The UGREEN DXP 4800, the Asustor Nimbus Store Gen 2. Then you have things like Synology's F4-425 Plus. Again, that really is more of a step back in many ways from the spec we just mentioned. And of course, QNAP's ever popular TS464. Now, all of these have a similar architecture with an Intel Celeron processor, or at the very least an N100 here, the Alder Lake generation that came before it. But the difference is that this new Terramaster manages to scale things up in ways that many users, myself included, we still don't know how they've actually done it. There's only 9 lanes to play with in the case of the N15 processor there. The N15 processor with 9 lanes gets spread pretty darn thin. And in the case of, well, I stopped the light going nuts there, the idea that they've not only been able to put a third M.2 bay, so that's 7 bays of storage on a 4-bay NAS system and 5 bays of storage on a 2-bay, but alongside that, to be able to spread out the lane and speed allocation to allow for 2 times 5 gigabit network in there, when I know a lot of users are going to say, why didn't they put a 10 on there? I get that, but there's things like failover and people maximizing it in the price point, blah, 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 and 10G controllers up in the price. But ultimately, it really does change the mold of what we expect these devices to be priced at. Now again, some won't like the lack of PCIe, some won't like the lack of ECC memory, which again at this price point I'd have to debate with you. And Terramaster's TOS software, again, although it isn't as mature as Synology and QNAP's offering, it is more mature, I would argue in many ways, than UGREEN software and even Asustor software, which nails the fundamentals really well, lacks a few of the AAA plus applications some people want. Now, obviously, when the Plus series becomes available, I hope to review them here on the channel because I still have questions. The stuff that we do now, for example, the adaptation and changes that have happened around the chassis and the cooling design ever so slightly can be discussed alongside now finally front mounting USB. But alongside that, I want to know about the PCIe allocation there. For example, to have 3 M.2s, are they all going to be at Gen 3 times 1 speed? Again, 9 lanes to play with. It's not impossible when you lay out everything that's there. It's actually feasible. But things like, are there going to be any lane sharing for those 5 gig network ports there? Because one of my big questions was the amount of lanes that will allow a user to put 10 GBE on a system like this, because it will technically need times 2 speed in order to do that. Now, they've gone for those 2 5s, which I think makes it possible. I am wondering about just how much, if there, in the background, if there's any bottlenecks. I probably think there isn't, because as long as they're not going with that PCIe slot there, when some brands have applied that and it's been at times 1 or times 2 speed, that does free things up a little bit. But I do still have question marks about how they've achieved this architecture. Now, the other thing, I've already referred to it several times, are these guys. Currently going through review, these are the non-Plus series here. These are effectively their entry-level series. And what the brand has done, in previous years, the entry level was always an ARM processor, an ARM Realtek processor traditionally, and it has much streamlined hardware on board, and ultimately, a lot of brands, as useful as that is to keep the costs down, it does mean that when they develop their software, they have to create slightly tweaked versions to run on x86 64-bit processors and then 64-bit ARM processors. And they've got to tweak and develop their software across 2 different SKUs. Clearly, Terramaster have looked at this and gone, that's a lot of work. So what they've done is scaled up their entry-level devices in these. These are arriving with the Celeron processor of its predecessor. I know that's going to have a mixed feeling and reaction there, but it has brought the price down, and it allows the 2 and the 4 bay standard class series there to arrive with an Intel x86 Celeron quad-core processor, although arguably an older one, and alongside that arriving with 2.5 GBE and 4 gig of memory. Many users are going to rightly point out that this feels like just the current 424 generation with its wings clipped, and I think that's kind of the point. These don't have the M.2 slots, they've only got one 2.5 gig network port on there, but they've raised the level of what the entry level price is. They've maintained the price point, but they've upped the general standard, and that has obviously meant that they've had to up the standard of this Plus series there, which again, once you compare it against the current market offerings at that same price point, it's pretty darn impressive. But long term, what I'm interested in is what a Pro and a Max series version of this are going to be. Those that haven't been following this brand for a while probably don't know that they have changed their portfolio and layout of their product range to include a standard class, and then they include a Plus, a Pro and a Max tier. And the Pro and the Max tier are where things traditionally get scaled up. I think this is where we're going to see the Twin Lake N355 processor there. I think this is where we're going to see maybe Arrow Lake processors there, those Intel Ultra Core processors being used in the Max. And I'm really looking forward to seeing just how Terramaster are going to expand this portfolio going into 2026, because right now it's an incredibly competitive proposition, both in terms of hardware and software. And again, I appreciate their software is not as mature as Synology and QNAP's. I also appreciate that a lot of users realistically are going to get a Terramaster NAS and slam in Unraid, slam in TrueNAS, and they're okay with that. As a turnkey proposition or as a ready-built DIY NAS software proposition, there's a lot to like here. But until we get one in the studio for a full review, I'm going to hold back what my true complete feelings are. But at least right now, literally on paper, these are very interesting NAS devices, and I think this is where, while we wait for QNAP to roll out its offering, we've got to wonder, is this the score to beat? Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. There should be an article linked below as well. And of course, as mentioned, watch out for the reviews of these guys coming up soon. And also, if you're watching this Terramaster, and I'm sure you are, seriously, you know that little F8 SSD thing? Come on, you can have some real fun here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.